Welcome to the Lapis Guides Introduction to QGIS Tutorials. Today in Module 5, we're going to be working with a data set that corresponds with the satellite imagery that we put together in Module 4. If you haven't done Module 4 yet, go back and see our earlier tutorials and follow along. You can see that I've already got a raster put in here. This is a saved version of the virtual raster that we created in Module 4 Part 3. And the first thing that I actually want to do right now is I want to change the projection of my project. Right? And the way that we can do that is we can go down here, and I want to put this in 4326. Right, and this will make this work with the data that we have a whole lot easier. Great. So now that we've prepared our raster with the right projection, let's go ahead and clip down to the right size for our data set that we want to work with. So hopefully you remember how to do that. We're just going to clip by extent. I'm going to select this region right here. Okay, and that's good enough to get started with. So the data set that we're going to be working with is actually one that was produced by one of our Lapis Guides apps. It was basically built to collect archaeological data on petroglyphs, burial mounds, things called balls, and other structures within Central Asia. Right, and this region here has been heavily studied by citizen scientists using the Lapis Guides application. And so we have a very good data set. There's a link to the data set in the description. You can download that and you can open it in either Google Sheets, Microsoft Excel, or whatever program you're most comfortable in. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to give titles to our columns. All right, so this is going to be type. This is obviously the date. This is the latitude and the longitude, and actually this column we don't need, so we can select the entire column and delete it. Now, when this project was created, petroglyphs were divided into two distinct subgroups: those that primarily depicted animals or man, and those that primarily depicted writing or symbols. Right, so we have two distinct groups of petroglyphs. Then we also have burial mounds within this data set, but there's a few other bits and pieces that we actually are just going to get rid of right now. So we'll scroll down. We'll find any of those outliers that we don't need. And here's a couple. And here's a few more. And that's all. All right, good. So what we need to do now is we need to save or download or export or whichever your specific program says to do. We need to do this as a comma separated value, a .csv. Now, as you've been seeing with satellite images or vector files or a lot of those normal files, we can actually just drag those directly into our layer panel. We cannot do that with a CSV file. Right, so we actually need to go up to layer, add delimited text layer, or we can choose the same button over here. All right, so you're going to navigate and find your file. You need to make sure that this is checked CSV. Right, in record and fields options, we want to make sure that this box is checked. It basically tells QGIS that the first row actually has the field names, and that will be important for our attribute table. And then we're using point coordinates. Our X field is the longitude, and our Y field is the latitude. And we do not have degrees, minutes, seconds coordinates. We have decimal coordinates. Okay, and we're going to use the 4326 projection that we already chose a little bit earlier. And so let's add that. And we'll close this. And you can see we've got some dots. I'm going to change the color so that it's a little bit more visible. All right, great. So there's all of the dots that are inside of our map. Now, if we zoom to the entire layer, we can see that there are some other data points elsewhere that we are not worried about. So the first thing that I want to do, working with this data set, is I want to select everything that is just within my region that I'm working with and get rid of everything else. All right. There's a couple of different ways that I can do this, and I'm going to show you the quickest right now, and that's the select features by area or single click. Right? And since it's very obvious which ones I want to work with, I can just drag a square over top of those. Those are now selected, right? And what I can do is I can right click, go to export, save features as, right? I'm going to save this as a shape file, not as a CSV anymore. It's a shape file. I'm going to name it, okay. And of course, I need to make sure I select this box, save only selected features. If I don't, I will just make a copy of what I had before. So make sure you've selected this. Click OK. Excellent. We now can uncheck this box as we don't need to see that anymore. Right? If we zoom out, you can see there's still only the data that's within our clipped raster. Now, what we want to be able to do with our data is to create a map that shows us where the petroglyphs are and where the burial mounds are. Now, as is often the case in QGIS, there's multiple ways that we can actually get to that end result, but I'm going to use rule-based queries as I think it's the easiest way to do that. All right, so we'll just click on our data. We'll change this to rule-based. And this one, I'm not going to bother differentiating between animal and man petroglyphs and writing and symbol petroglyphs. I'm just going to lump them all together into just petroglyphs. And that'll just make it a little bit easier to put the whole thing together. All right, so we're going to create a formula, type equals animal or man, or type equals writing or symbol. Okay, and we'll make that some sort of like a bright color. We'll change the size just a little bit. Excellent. All right, we'll create one more rule. Type equals burial mound. And that's the only one that we need in there. And we'll change this to more like a bluish color. Oh. Also make sure that we've given it a name. Great, so there we go. There's our main map. All right, you can take this into Print Composer, you can add a scale bar on it, a key to make sure people know which color means what. You can also add a subtitle or a description box, whatever you want to call it, that tells people how many of each there are. And how do we know how many there are? Well, it's really simple. We can go up to our attribute table, right? And I can create a quick little formula that says type equals burial mound, if I want to know how many burial mounds there are in my data. Right, and I can select those, and right here it says there's a total of 746, and 18 were selected based on my equation or my formula. So that means that there are 18 data points that correspond to a burial mound. Right, so then obviously 746 minus 18 would give us the number of petroglyphs. Or we could go in and we could create the same formula as we did earlier in our rule-based to select how many petroglyph points there are, and that will tell us the number of petroglyphs. That's the end of Module 5. It's really quick, it's really easy. basically importing CSV data, all you need to remember is you can't just drag and drop it, and you need to be able to follow some of those little instructions. I will say one common mistake that people often make is putting the latitude and longitude in the wrong X and Y axes. Basically what happens is your data gets turned on its side because it's swapping the X and Y axes with your latitude and longitude. If that does happen, just remove it, start over, and make sure that you get your X and Y axes correct the second time. I hope you were able to follow along really easily with this tutorial. Please let me know if you have any questions down in the comments section, and I will see you for Module 6.